September 11th, 2001, I had made a last-minute trip down to Washington, D.C. to fill in for Lance Armstrong, who had to cancel for a health event that Newsweek magazine was doing. It was an all-day confab looking at trends and cutting-edge stuff in the field of health for a special issue that Newsweek was going to be doing. And I was the keynote speaker since I was filling in for Lance. So I was the first up for the day, and I had worked really hard to come up with a speech since it was last minute, and frankly thought it was one of the better addresses I had ever given. I was very pleased with myself. And when Rick Smith, the editor of Newsweek, came up afterwards to thank me, it wasn't nearly the effusive appreciation I expected, because he said, thank you so much, Deborah. He was distracted. And he said, I know Deborah needs to leave to go cover some breaking news. And I thought, well, that's a nice way to, let me get out of there so I can catch my flight to go back to New York to do Inside Edition. So Smith then proceeded to say to the group assembled, I need to tell you about some news events that are going on in New York. An airplane has just hit one of the towers at the World Trade Center. And there's a situation going on in New York, and we're still trying to get information about it. I immediately started digging in my purse to try to find my cell phone to call New York to find out what was going on. Got out of the room, got onto an 800 line, a 1-800 number to our office because the normal numbers weren't working. And of course, we later learned that all of the cell phone tower repeaters were located on top of the World Trade Center. Plus, everybody in New York and America was trying to call their loved ones and friends in New York City. So the lines were jammed. I found out what was going on. I thought, okay, fine, I'll just, jump in a car and get to the airport real quick and get to New York. Of course, they had closed the airspace. Now I'm stuck in Washington, and I am watching the coverage on television, trying to figure out how am I going to do my television show since I can't get to New York. And the people at Newsweek also owned a bunch of television stations, including in Washington. And so they were able to help me get the television facilities I needed in order to do Inside Edition. So I was on top of the Chamber of Commerce on the roof with the White House behind me, and you could see the snipers about every 15, 20 feet on the top of the White House. By the time I was doing Inside Edition, the story was very different from one airplane had crashed into the World Trade Center. Obviously, the second plane hit, the towers collapsed. We knew that America was under attack. The third plane was crashing into the Pentagon. The fourth plane was headed west and then made that hairpin turn over Ohio back toward the East Coast. And in Washington, as I'm there at the Capitol Hotel, just a couple of blocks from the White House, they dismissed all the federal workers. And I remember thinking it was like that scene in Gone with the Wind when Scarlett's going this way and Atlanta's going that way. I stood at the window and watched people walking with purpose, some running, all with concern on their faces, getting as far away from the White House and the Capitol area as they could. And I'm stuck there. And I don't know what to do, right? So it was really scary just for me personally. And then I started thinking about everybody that I knew who was in the World Trade Center. And I kind of did a Scarlett O'Hara. I can't think about that now. I'll think about that tomorrow, because that wasn't a thought I wanted to go down. So now it's just like, get the show on the air, figure out a way to get this done. And then the Pentagon got hit. And so as I'm standing on the rooftop a couple hours later doing Inside Edition, you could see the smoke of the Pentagon over my left shoulder. And what you would occasionally hear with me raising my voice, trying to drown out the sound, was the screech of the F-16s that were by that point on combat air patrol up and down the Northeast corridor. And they flew so low, it was almost as though they could part your hair. It was, I have chills as I say that. It was an out-of-body experience. It was something unlike anything any American had ever experienced domestically on our own territory. Before I was on the rooftop, though, as I'm on the phones trying to figure out how I'm going to get my show on the air, the gentleman who had booked me for the speech came up to me, and he was absolutely ashen in his face. And I said, "Oh my God, did you did you lose someone? Was there someone you knew on one of the planes or in New York or at the Pentagon? And he shook his head and he just said, no, I was supposed to be at Windows on the World this morning and at a conference. Remember, there was a conference going on and all those people died. He said, I was supposed to be on the top floor of the World Trade Center, but I didn't go because I've booked you so many times for speeches. He said, but I've never actually heard you speak in person. So I wanted to just stick around because they were based in Alexandria. I just want to stick around and hear what you had to say. And I remember holding his hands and just, we both said a prayer, Lord, thank you. That's all you needed to say. And it was just one of those moments, like we've heard so many from 9/11, where if but something would have been very, very different. So I did the show and I made the car service car that was supposed to drive me to the airport just wait. I thought, fine, he could drive me to New York. And then he told me, no, we can't. We're not allowed to cross state lines. And by then there's no rental cars and everything's shut down. So I thought, well, what the heck? I'll go wait at the train station. And it was kind of like the Polar Express. Out of nowhere, this train appeared and you heard the announcement, da 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 da, Trenton and New York Penn Station. I'm like, great. I ran, I got on the train, got up to New York. The sun, I guess, had dropped below the horizon, but it was still light enough to see. As you came across New Jersey, you could see lower Manhattan and just the huge cloud of smoke made real for me what I had been seeing on television all day. And got into Penn Station. Of course, there's no taxis, like, no worries. Got, I'm in my working lady outfit. I got my heels on. I got my little rollaway bag. And I figured I'll just walk to the Upper East Side. It was, I don't know, like Penn Station's in the 30s and we lived in the 70s. So whatever that was. So, it's like a couple of miles, no worries. Walk over to Madison Avenue. Again, this bus, Manhattan bus, appears out of nowhere, MTA. And I have a bus card on me and I have enough change. I don't even know what it costs to ride the bus, right? I was always taxi cabbing everywhere. And I got on the bus. I said, I'm so sorry, I don't have a bus pass and I don't have any money. He said, lady, it's all for free. We just want to get you home safe tonight. I was like, wow. So that was a Tuesday. And it was a beautiful Tuesday in Washington and a stunningly gorgeous Tuesday in New York. And it happened to be primary day. And keep getting those chills. My really good friend was working at Citigroup and had been conducting a conference in a meeting in one of the conference rooms. And he could see from where he was, they're high up there, he could see something bad was happening. And then they found out what was going on. So he dismissed everything. He told all of his people, go home, leave the city if you live outside New York. It just seems like the right thing to do. And he was at the train station going back out to Long Island where he lived. And a gentleman who's a friend of ours, goes to our church, was coming off the train in Penn Station. They just happened to bump into each other. And my friend said, and my friend worked at Aon, which was in, I don't know if it was the North Tower or the South Tower, but they were located down in World Trade Center. And my friend said to Frank, don't go to the office. It's really bad down there. And he said, how come you're just not getting to work? And he said, well, it's election day. I was campaigning for Mayor Suozzi. Tom Suozzi was running for Congress or county executive or something. He was running for higher office. He said, I was campaigning for Tom Suozzi, and that's why I'm late to work. And my friend said, I think Tom Suozzi saved your life because he was campaigning. Otherwise, he would have been in his office. And I had two friends who actually were in their offices at Aon. They were members of my church. My son's hockey coach worked in the building. He was lost. So all in, there were 4 people who were members of my church that, I directly knew who died that day. And I was a Sunday school teacher. And so on Sunday, which would have been Tuesday, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, like the 15th, I guess, go to the Sunday school director and say, what are we supposed to do? Because it's going to be, standing room only in church. And they even did an audio thing because the overflow went into the fellowship hall. And I know kids who have never been to Sunday school are going to be in Sunday school. And what do you want us to do? And she said, stick with your lesson plan. I'm like, really? Okay. My lesson plan that day was an Old Testament story, and I won't remember where it is, but it was about the old lady who didn't have very much flour and didn't have very much oil, but the Lord had always told her to be, giving and kind to passersby. They have less than you. And so the old man comes, it's like a guy passing through, and she miraculously, it's kind of like the loaves and fishes with Jesus, there was enough flour, enough oil, and she was able to bake bread to feed this guy. And it's a miracle. And one of the little girls in my class, a fifth grader, said, well, my married name is Wellner. Well, Mrs. Wellner, that's great. Miracles like that happen in the Bible, but they don't happen in real life. And this little girl was named Hope because her two brothers, her mother was expecting her when the family found out that her two older siblings had Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, which is an inherited gene that the mother carried. So it was, needless to say, an incredibly stressful pregnancy, not knowing what was going to happen. And so this little girl was born and named Hope for all the reasons that one can understand. And I said, well, Hope, I can really appreciate, why you would feel that way. But I do think God still does miracles. They just might not be dramatic the way they are in the Bible, because the Bible's written to really make a point. So maybe things are a little bit amplified. I said, but right now, Charlotte's daddy, Charlotte was in the class, and her daddy was Frank. I said, Charlotte's daddy is in the sanctuary right now. And he could have been the fifth member of our church to die, except he was campaigning for Mr. Suozzi, and he wasn't in his office like he usually would be. And maybe that's not as dramatic as the old lady making the bread with next to nothing. But Charlotte's family is not preparing for a funeral the way so many other families are. Another friend of mine who died that day, who worked at Aon, left behind a wife and a very young son. And in those early days of 9/11, those early hours of 9/11, we all thought if we could get the photograph of the person who hasn't shown up yet in enough people's hands, on enough television screens, on enough fences down in Lower Manhattan, that somehow miraculously they would walk through the dust and they would be okay. And my friend named Ellen understandably wanted her husband's picture everywhere. So I made sure we got it on Inside Edition. And you couldn't get below a certain point in Lower Manhattan. They had it cordoned off, but if you were news media, you get in. So I was able to get a boatload of those flyers and give them to my people who were going down in there, and gave them a roll of tape and said, look, when you can, stick this on a wall somewhere. Maybe it'll help, and it'll certainly help my friend knowing that that's happening. So he never came back, and his name is one of those that's on that beautiful moat around the pond there where the tower used to stand. And subsequent to 9/11, I wrote a book called Thank You Power, Making the Science of Gratitude Work for You. And I wanted to underscore how resilience and gratitude are linked. There's some really cool research about that. And I shared my friend Ellen's story about how she had moved on from her husband's tragic and untimely death. And of course, before I published anything, I gave her the copy and let her prove it and approve it and proofread and change anything that wasn't comfortable for her, because this is her story. And the only change she made was, you don't move on. She X'd out the on and she inserted forward. And that change was really important, not only for my telling her husband's story, but I think in understanding how we as a nation, we as a people deal with tragedy. You don't move on from it. Moving on means you've left it behind. You move forward. You take it with you. You find a comfortable place in your back pocket or your inside pocket, or maybe, in the backpack that we all carry things in metaphorically. You find a comfortable place to put it, and you move forward and you bring it with you. You never forget. You never lose the meaning of what happened and how you're changed because of it. And the resolution that we all made to try to be kinder, to be more supportive, to be more collegial, to be more, is part of what you take forward with you. And for me, that is the most important story of 9/11. But bad stuff is going to happen. And the lesson from 9/11 is we can move forward from it, and we can still be happy.
Deborah, you had one child at the time?
No, I had 3 kids.
How old were they then?
Yeah, so yeah, I'll tell the mommy part of that.
Right.
So I'm in Washington, D.C., and I get word to my husband that, yeah, I'm 2 blocks away from the White House, but I'm fine. My 2 sons, one was in 4th grade, one was in kindergarten, and my daughter was in nursery school. And the school that my boys attended was very much stiff upper lip. We were like the post office: rain, snow, sleet, hail, and terrorist attacks do not sway us from our sturdy rounds. And my husband went up to the school to see about getting the kids out. And the school said, no, I think if it's okay with you, we're going to keep the boys here, and we're going to try to let them have a normal school day. And if they ask, we will let them know that, you all are fine, your family is fine, if they ask, but we're not going to interrupt class. We're going to try to keep things as usual as possible. And that was probably a good thing, because once I got home, certainly, and I'm sure during the day while my husband was there, the TV was on and you were watching the coverage, and the coverage was horrific. My daughter was in nursery school, and the babysitter went and got her, and she was home, and we just kept her away from the TV. But it's very interesting. My older son was 9 years old, and he knew I was in Washington, and another boy's mom was also in Washington. And that woman's business required her to call on occasion on the Pentagon. So that little boy was terrified that his mother was at the Pentagon and had probably just been killed. And he is understandably expressing his worry. And my son goes, oh my God, my mom's in Washington too. She's probably dead. So I, from that moment on, would not only tell my family, including my children, where mom was going on a business trip, but I'm going to be at the convention center in Chicago, or I'm going to be at the so-and-so arena. So it wasn't just I'll be in Washington. I'll be in Washington at, I forget the name of that hotel. It's the one that's 2 blocks away from the White House. I'll be in Washington at the blah, blah hotel, and I'll probably be leaving there around 11. And that fear, that worry, I never wanted my kids to experience that again. But that was another surprise when I got home and he told me, Mom, I was sure you were dead.
What were their fears in the days after? Because I remember my children had fears.
I don't specifically remember them expressing, oh, I'm afraid of this or I'm afraid of that. I mean, obviously we lived on the East Side, Upper East Side, and even, up in the 70s, you could smell what was going on down in Lower Manhattan. And we were baking cupcakes for the firefighters, and we were doing things like that. What I was trying to do was trying to keep it positive. And, we would go by the fire station, and they probably didn't want to eat cupcakes made by little kids, but I hope the thought was good enough for them. But we would make a point of going by the fire station, going by the police station, and just anybody who was outside, the babies in the buggy, would like, thank you, we really appreciate what you do, which was kind of all you could do with little kids. We did not leave the city. We had friends who were so afraid of being in Manhattan that they left town, and they literally took their kids out of school and moved. We didn't do that. We hunkered down, and, we're New Yorkers. Or were at the time anyway.
Anything else you want to add?
No, no, I think what you're doing, it's interesting. Who is it that has the motto, never forget? It's a state, isn't it? Like on the license plate or something. What's that from?
I don't know. For me, it's the
9/11,
9/11,
right?
never forget.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's not only important that we never forget the horror of that day, but I think it's almost even more important that we remember the way America came together, particularly now, 10 years later, or 20 years later, when we all are so aware of the divisions in our country. I think it's really important that we be reminded that once upon a time, a horrific thing happened to our country and it brought us together. Maybe we could come together and not have the horrific thing be the catalyst.
Amen to that.
All right, Shelley, this was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. My
you.
pleasure. I'm impressed and in awe of this project you've taken on. It's very important.